During the intense conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the renowned Azov Brigade once again played a crucial role on the front lines. The Azov Brigade was responsible for destroying hidden underground Russian bunkers during hostilities in the Kyiv region just the other day. This also served as an official show of Ukraine's strength to the Russian troops stationed in the area. So, what were the circumstances that led to the Azov Brigade's successful offensive? In this video, we will delve into the details of the latest events and battles that have taken place in the Ukraine war. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like our content to stay informed. Ukrainian military forces continue to eliminate Russian troops stationed on Ukrainian soil. In a recent demonstration, Azov Brigade fighters showcased how they were able to remove Russian troops from their bunkers, attack aircraft from the 1st Mechanized Battalion trained against Russian forces, and an Azov Brigade fighter recorded the conflict from his perspective. An identical video was uploaded to the Telegram channel of the 3rd Assault Brigade, where it was made available to the public. The Kyiv region was the site of a coordinated landing operation by Azov fighters throughout the day. Russian troops were forced to abandon their observation points and bunkers, despite being bombarded. They encountered difficult terrain and faced strong resistance from the Russians. Azov Brigade warriors continued fighting until the Russians were completely wiped out, and the positions were consolidated. To ease the pressure on Kursk, Russian forces had increased their attacks in Kyiv, while fierce fighting between Russian and Ukrainian forces continued. The Ukrainians found themselves in a precarious situation. However, the situation in the region changed following the incursion by the Azov Regiment against Russian soldiers. The territory was captured by Ukrainian forces, and the Russian forces were forced to retreat before they could regroup. Earlier, it was reported that a special operations unit of the Ukrainian armed forces launched an operation against the Russian army's logistics in the Kursk region. The objective of this attack was to weaken the defensive capabilities of the Russian troops. As a result of the incident, 7 vehicles were destroyed, including 5 pontoons. Officials have reported that Ukrainian troops continue to inflict losses on Russian troops on all fronts. Recently, members of the 63rd Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces launched an attack on the landing site where Russian forces were positioned. The Ukrainian army put the Russian soldiers through a severe test. According to Alexander Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Ukrainian Defense Forces managed to halt the Russian advance on the front line towards Pokrovsky. In the last 6 days, no Russian progress has been reported. In an interview a few days ago, Syrsky explained this situation. According to him, the armed forces prevented the Russians from maneuvering and reinforcing their troops, denying them the opportunity to pursue their objectives. Syrsky stated that the Russians have not made any progress toward Pokrovsk in the past 6 days, not even a meter. In other words, our plan is proving effective. The attackers' ability to maneuver and deploy reinforcements from other locations has been eradicated, thanks to our defenders' efforts, he said. Syrsky also mentioned that this setback for Russian forces is being experienced in other regions as well. Additionally, the commander-in-chief noted that the intensity of the offensive, as well as the volume of artillery bombardment, had decreased. Previously, President Volodymyr Zelensky made a statement about the challenging circumstances faced by Ukrainian defenders in the Pokrovsky sector. The president emphasized that the main goal of defense forces in this sector of the front line is to eliminate as many Russian armed forces as possible. According to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the situation in the Pokrovsky direction of the Donetsk region remains difficult. Over the past day, battles took place in the sector of the front in the settlements of Sukhovalka, Pantelyman, Selene Pol, Venka, Novograd, Myrolyubka, Novograd, and MKA. Despite Syrsky's statement that soldiers joining the Ukrainian armed forces began the conflict with less training than they would have preferred, he addressed this by noting that the situation on the front lines was extremely dynamic. In the last 24 hours, 151 combat incidents have taken place on the Ukrainian battlefield between members of the Ukrainian Defense Forces and Russian forces. Pokrovsky and Kyiv are experiencing the most intense fighting. The Russians are attempting to launch offensive operations, but as a result, they are suffering enormous casualties. In the current situation on the front, as reported by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, it is clear that Ukrainian defenders have successfully thwarted Russian soldiers' attempts to penetrate deeper into Ukraine. The Russian occupation forces had planned to advance towards Sumy after completing their offensive in the Kyiv region. However, various circumstances, including the active participation of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kursk region of the Russian Federation, prevented this from happening. In an interview with CNN, Alexander Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, confirmed this information. He mentioned that the Russian army had previously intended to use Krushina as a launchpad for further operations against our defense forces. The Russian army had reached a point where the attacking forces they were directing were no longer sufficient. Slowly, the Russians began redeploying their forces for future operations and continued bombing our settlements daily. By carrying out an operation in the Kursk region, the Ukrainian armed forces were able to reduce the likelihood of a new enemy attack and prevent them from consolidating their forces. We brought the fight to the enemy's territory so they could experience the same emotions we face daily, Syrskyi said. In the Kursk region, a security zone has been established that is exclusively under our control, and we have captured a sufficient number of prisoners. This has created an exchange fund to facilitate the release of our soldiers. According to Syrskyi, thanks to the actions of the Ukrainian army, the threat of a Russian assault on the city of Sumy has been successfully avoided. In the past day, 7 shootouts occurred in the direction of Kharkiv, around Sterita and Butsk. Ukrainian forces managed to repel Russian advances, though a Russian offensive is still ongoing around Zivka, Kluska, Lozova, and Andrika. Russian forces launched operations in the vicinity of Drul, Yufka, Makiivka, Nevsky, Chernoskina, and Novosad, all located in the Lymansky direction. A total of 14 military engagements were concluded, while 3 are still ongoing in the districts of Borno, Kamiansk, and Spear. Ukrainian defenders successfully repelled 4 Russian assaults from the Sivers direction. 13 battles took place around Chobo Yar, Pretesanai, Ivanivsky, Valora, and Ivanoptik, with 15 separate incursions against Ukrainian positions near Nelipak and Torit. Of these, 8 battles were won, while 7 are still in progress. In the Pokrovsky direction, a total of 42 engagements took place across the communities of Sukovalka, Pantelymanivka, Selene Pol, BZ, Venka, Novotroitsk, Grodivka, Myrolyevka, and Novogradsky. 37 offensive actions were stopped, while 5 continue. During this approach, 332 Russian soldiers were eliminated, 144 of them permanently. According to preliminary data, 2 tanks, a Tiger armored combat vehicle, a BM-21 Grad, a drone, 3 cars, and 9 vehicles belonging to the Russian army were destroyed. Additionally, 10 vehicles, 4 tanks, and a mortar from the Russian side were damaged in the conflict. Russian soldiers conducted a total of 28 attacks in the direction of Kurv, near Lisva, Ukraine, Halytsinifa, Krasnogorka, Hariva, and Scientini. Ukrainian defenses thwarted 24 assaults, and 4 are still underway. Banji, Konstantinivka, and Bugar were locations where Russian soldiers launched 6 assaults in an attempt to dislodge Ukrainian soldiers from defense lines controlled by Russian forces. These assaults took place in the Frems direction. A total of 4 battles were won, while 2 are currently ongoing. The offensive that Russian troops attempted to launch near Robotyne in the direction of Orikhiv was repelled. The Russian army was defeated in the direction of the Dnieper following 3 attacks on Ukrainian soldiers' positions. The so-called new government of Ukraine is doing everything possible to persuade the local population that Russia is here to stay in the territories currently under occupation. However, even the occupiers themselves no longer believe this. These sentiments have been notably affected by the operation that Ukrainian defense forces have been carrying out in the Kursk region of the Russian Federation. Russian occupiers are currently experiencing great unease in the areas of Zaporizhia and Kherson, which they have taken under their control. They are very concerned about the attacks that the armed forces have carried out against military installations, which the invaders are trying to deliberately conceal. We have been talking to the Russians who recently stayed with us about the events taking place in the border regions of the Russian Federation. The assaults carried out by the Ukrainian armed forces were a complete surprise to them in the territory they referred to as mainland Russia. They couldn't believe it was even possible. Specifically, this is the name they give to the lands that are part of the Russian Federation. According to them, Ukraine should be forgotten. It won't exist anymore, said one person who lived in Melitopol while it was under occupation. In their opinion, there is now a lot of talk about the potential recapture of Crimea. As for the occupying forces, they believe the only way to prevent this is by cutting off all the routes connecting the peninsula with the parts of Kherson and Zaporizhia regions under their control. From my perspective, the fact that the Russians have driven up the market prices of apartments in Berdyansk and Melitopol has become a signal. According to my relative, who is also a real estate agent, the families of those occupying the property were selling off their homes. According to the citizen from Melitopol, they once thought it would be a wonderful investment, but for some reason, they have now changed their minds. On the other hand, The so-called nationalization of homes in currently occupied regions is in full swing. The new government is taking homes and apartments from Ukrainian residents who fled the occupation. According to our source within the Ukrainian intelligence community, this is how the Russians conduct various activities. They make money by evicting Ukrainians from homes protected by the Constitution and forcefully bring people back to these lands, compelling them to purchase Russian Federation passports through a random selection process. Since it is difficult to re-register an apartment without Russian papers, our contact informed us that some of the confiscated homes are allocated to meet the needs of the occupiers. Among these occupiers are military personnel from Russia, medical staff, and other individuals. In the occupied territory of Donetsk, the situation differs somewhat from what is happening elsewhere. The main reason is that, in 2014, part of the territory was taken by Russian occupiers who continued to exercise authority over it. In the city of Donetsk, which serves as the regional center, they are trying to put on a brave face. The inhabitants of the currently occupied city believe that the authorities are confident that the Russian army will soon take control of the remaining territory. They stated that this will undoubtedly happen, but the number of casualties is of no concern to anyone. Knowing this, Bakhmut has become a city wiped off the face of the earth, and it is possible that other communities will share the same fate. One resident of Donetsk shared with us that it is a horrible torment to listen to the grandiose declarations of the occupiers. According to him, occupation officials are asking local residents to convince their friends and relatives, who are now living in Ukrainian-controlled areas like Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and others, to move to Donetsk. He claims this will save them. However, we are aware of the golden promises made to those who lived in the newly occupied Avdiivka and the consequences of those promises. People are still living in dilapidated houses in terrible conditions, without water, electricity, or heating. A woman from Donetsk stated, "There are indeed elderly people living here, and during this time, the invaders haven't been able to produce anything new. All they've managed to do is maintain what was left from before the conflict. There's so much garbage that our cities are drowning in it. Even in the center of Donetsk, there are already a large number of rats breeding in the dump. The quality of life remains the same." A woman said that in certain parts of the city, it's mandatory to perform tasks once a day during a limited time window, while in other areas, such services are practically non-existent. Additionally, the crime rate has worsened. More and more murders and rapes are being committed in the territories under occupation. In the city of Makiivka, located in the Donetsk region, a serial rapist was recently discovered. Local residents reported that the attacks carried out by the masked psychopath have already claimed several victims, including a 14-year-old girl. Many speculate on social media that the perpetrator could be a Russian soldier. Of course, several factors contribute to such a conclusion. It has been determined that so-called heroes of Suvorov, particularly Caucasians, are responsible for a series of kidnappings of young women in the Donetsk and Luhansk areas. Several victims' bodies have already been discovered. Because the invaders are conducting their own investigations, no standard investigation is being conducted. For instance, the girl who disappeared in Holyuka was last seen with people occupying the district. What exactly happened to her remains unclear. She was walking along the road when a military vehicle approached her. It's been over a month since anyone has seen her, a local resident reported, saying that she was dragged away. The girl has not been seen since. As you can see, the Russian occupiers have freed the residents of Ukrainian cities from the ordinary conditions of life. They are now looking to expand their numbers. What are your thoughts on this? Share your opinion in the comment section, subscribe to our channel, and activate notifications to stay updated with our latest videos. Thank you for following us closely.